This project was to back engineer the alien craft. I went into the hangar door, and in the hangar door was the disc, the flying saucer that I worked on.
For decades, Bob Lazar's shocking claims about working on alien technology at Area 51 have fueled endless debate. He described gravity-defying crafts, advanced propulsion systems, and a mysterious element, far beyond human capabilities. Skeptics dismissed him, but recent developments have reignited interest. And now Lazar has finally revealed what he designed at Area 51, showing evidence that could change everything. Could this be the ultimate proof of extraterrestrial technology hidden in plain sight? Join us as we uncover what Bob Lazar has finally shown about the alien technology he worked on at Area 51. The Bob Lazar revelation, what he showed the world. Bob Lazar's story isn't just another conspiracy theory. It's the kind that lingers in your mind, making you question what's real. He's the man who claims to have worked at a secretive facility linked to Area 51, where he allegedly saw and worked on alien technology. But what's the proof? What did he actually show the world? It all started in 1989 when Bob Lazar sat down for an interview that would change everything. He didn't just talk about UFOs. He described in detail the propulsion system of an alleged alien spacecraft. According to him, this wasn't some experimental military jet. It was something far beyond human engineering, a craft powered by a mysterious element. Element 115. The implications were staggering. If what he was saying was true, it would mean the government had access to technology that defied the laws of physics as we understood them. But at the time, there was no way to verify his claims. And yet, decades later, science caught up. Element 115 was officially synthesized. So was Lazar telling the truth all along? You will want to watch this video to the end, because there's more to the story than we've been led to believe. Fast forward to today, and the story has taken a dramatic turn. Lazar has come forward again, this time with something tangible. In a rare public moment, he revealed what he claims is a small piece of Element 115, the very substance that supposedly makes alien spacecraft fly. The mere mention of it had been enough to stir debate for decades, but seeing it, that was a whole new level. To understand why this is a big deal, we need to talk about what makes Element 115 so special. When Lazar first spoke about it in the late 80s, it wasn't even on the periodic table. Scientists dismissed it as pure fantasy. But then, in 2003, Russian physicists officially synthesized a version of it, moscovium. Was this proof that Lazar had been telling the truth all along? It certainly raised eyebrows. But there was a catch. The version synthesized in labs was highly unstable, decaying within milliseconds. Lazar, however, insists that the element he worked with at Area 51 was stable. And it was this stability that allowed it to function as a fuel source for an advanced propulsion system. But let's not forget how Lazar describes this propulsion system. It's not like anything we've ever seen. According to him, the alien craft he worked on used a gravity propulsion mechanism that manipulated space and time. Instead of traditional engines pushing the craft forward, it supposedly generated its own gravitational field, bending the fabric of space itself. This, he claimed, was why these UFOs could dart across the sky at impossible speeds, make sharp-angled turns with no inertia, and even hover completely silently. Sounds crazy, right? But here's where it gets even weirder. Over the years, multiple military pilots and intelligence officials have come forward describing UFOs that move exactly like Lazar's descriptions. The famous Tic Tac UFO incident reported by Navy pilots in 2004,
on ASA. My gosh!
Where a craft defied physics and outmaneuvered the most advanced jets, matches Lazar's claims to an unsettling degree. Could it be that the US government really has access to this technology? And if so, why is it still being kept secret? Skeptics, of course, argue that Lazar's claims are nothing more than science fiction. They point out that no one has been able to verify his employment records at Los Alamos or S4, the facility near Area 51 where he allegedly worked. But then again, Lazar himself has repeatedly stated that efforts were made to erase his past, wiping out any trace of his involvement. Even investigative journalists have struggled to find definitive proof either way. So what do we make of that? The biggest moment came when Lazar finally showed what he claimed was physical evidence. His piece of element 115. If real, it could change everything. It would mean extraterrestrial technology is not just a theory, it exists. But here's the problem. Proving its authenticity is another challenge altogether. Scientists would need to analyze it, and Lazar has expressed reluctance in handing it over, fearing it might be confiscated or suppressed. And given how the government has historically handled UFO-related matters, who can blame him? Yet despite all the secrecy, doubts, and unanswered questions, Bob Lazar's story refuses to die. In fact, it has only grown stronger over time. Why? Because much of what he described decades ago keeps aligning with what we're learning now. Official Pentagon reports on UFOs, whistleblower testimonies, and declassified government documents all suggest that something beyond human capability is out there. And the more we learn, the more Lazar's claims seem less like fantasy and more like a glimpse into a hidden reality. So where does that leave us? Did Bob Lazar really work on alien spacecraft? Does he truly have a piece of element 115? And if so, why won't he let it be tested? These are the questions that continue to fuel endless debate. Maybe, just maybe, that's because there's more truth to his story than we've been led to believe. Keep watching as we dive deeper into this story. The government's cover-up in Lazar's missing past. Bob Lazar's story isn't just controversial, it's actively suppressed. And if you think that's an exaggeration, consider this. The moment he went public with his claims, his entire past seemed to vanish. Officially, there's no record of him ever working at Los Alamos National Laboratory, despite evidence to the contrary. No employment records, no academic transcripts. It's as if his history was erased overnight. But why? Lazar has maintained from the start that the US government wanted to silence him. He wasn't supposed to talk about what he saw at S4, the secret facility near Area 51, where he claims to have worked on alien technology. According to him, they had strict security measures in place, monitoring employees closely and ensuring no one shared classified information. But once he realized how deep the secrecy ran, he felt he had no choice but to go public. He believed that if people knew what he had seen, it would make it harder for the government to make him disappear. But let's rewind. Before Lazar became the man who exposed Area 51's secrets, he was a scientist with an impressive background, at least according to his own account. He says he studied at MIT and Caltech, earning degrees in physics and electronics. Yet when journalists tried to verify his education, there was no official record of him ever attending those schools. Skeptics seized on this, calling him a fraud. But here's where things get interesting. Several people who worked with him at Los Alamos have come forward, confirming that he was indeed employed there. In fact, a 1982 newspaper article mentions Lazar as a physicist at the lab, working on advanced propulsion systems. If he never had a scientific background, how did he end up working in such a specialized field? This pattern of erased records extends beyond his education. According to Lazar, when he worked at S4, he had a top-secret clearance. He was part of a select group of scientists analyzing alien technology, specifically the propulsion system of a recovered spacecraft. But when he decided to speak out, everything changed. He was allegedly threatened, his house was raided multiple times, and his credibility was attacked from every angle. It wasn't just about discrediting him, it was about making sure no one believed him. One of the most chilling parts of Lazar's story involves what he claims happened inside S4. He wasn't just working on any piece of advanced machinery. He was studying technology that seemed impossible. He describes walking into a hangar where several saucer-shaped crafts were being studied. These weren't crude metal objects. They were sleek, otherworldly, and unlike anything built by human hands. Some were partially dismantled, while others appeared fully intact. According to him, scientists weren't just trying to reverse engineer the crafts, they were trying to understand the principles behind their propulsion. And that's where things get even stranger. Lazar's description of the propulsion system sounds like something out of science fiction. Instead of using traditional engines or fuel, the crafts supposedly generated their own gravitational fields. This allowed them to move in ways that defied physics as we understand it. No sound, no visible means of propulsion, just instant movement, as if they were slipping through space itself. He even claimed that inside the craft there were no conventional controls, just a strange, minimalist interior designed for beings much smaller than humans. If true, this revelation would mean the government has been sitting on alien technology for decades, possibly longer. But here's the real question. If they had this technology, why haven't they used it? Why hasn't it been incorporated into our own military aircraft? Some believe that's exactly what's happening behind closed doors. Others argue that the technology is so advanced, we simply don't have the knowledge to replicate it yet. Either way, the secrecy surrounding it raises more questions than answers. And then there's the issue of how the government reacted to Lazar's claims. If he were just making things up, why would they go to such lengths to erase his past? Why the multiple raids on his property? Lazar's story doesn't exist in a vacuum. Over the years, numerous whistleblowers, former military officials, and even government insiders have made statements that align with what he said decades ago. The Pentagon has openly admitted to investigating UFOs. Declassified reports describe craft that behave exactly like what Lazar claimed to have worked on. Even high-ranking officials, like former Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid, have acknowledged that the government has been studying UFOs for years. So, is Bob Lazar telling the truth? That's the question that continues to haunt this story. If he's lying, then he's pulled off one of the most elaborate hoaxes in history. But if he's telling the truth, it means the government has been hiding the most important discovery in human history, proof that we are not alone. And if that's the case, what else aren't they telling us? The hunt for element 115 and the science behind the mystery. Imagine holding in your hands a substance so powerful it could defy gravity itself. That's exactly what Bob Lazar claims to have encountered at S4. Element 115, a mysterious material supposedly used to power alien spacecraft. But here's where things get really bizarre. When Lazar first mentioned element 115 in the late 1980s, it wasn't even on the periodic table. Officially, it didn't exist. This element, Lazar insists, was the key to the propulsion system of the extraterrestrial crafts he worked on. Unlike anything we've ever created, it supposedly produced its own gravitational field, bending space-time in ways we don't fully understand. It's a claim that sounds impossible until you realize that modern physics is still struggling to grasp the full nature of gravity itself. But let's address the big question. Did Lazar smuggle out a sample of element 115? He strongly hinted at it for years, though he's never outright confirmed it. If he did, that would explain a lot, like the multiple raids on his home by federal agents. The most notable one happened in 2017 when the FBI, along with local law enforcement, swarmed his property under the pretense of searching for a toxic chemical. But skeptics believe the real target was a piece of the alien material. The idea that Lazar could have stolen a piece of government-classified alien tech sounds like something out of a movie. But if he really had proof, why not just show it to the world? Well, consider this. If he did, he would either be discredited instantly or possibly eliminated altogether. And if the government was willing to erase his academic and professional history, what else would they be willing to do to keep this secret under wraps? To the average person, Lazar's description of how these UFOs operated sounds like pure science fiction. No visible engines, no exhaust, no conventional propulsion, just smooth instant acceleration and impossible maneuvers. But if you ask physicists, they'll tell you that the idea of warping space-time isn't entirely outside the realm of possibility. Lazar explained that these crafts weren't simply flying, they were manipulating gravity. Instead of pushing against air or using combustion engines, they created a localized distortion in the fabric of space itself. This would allow them to fall toward their destination rather than fly in a traditional sense. If true, this technology is light years ahead of anything we have today. And yet here's the eerie part. Modern scientific theories are slowly catching up to Lazar's claims. Some physicists are now exploring the idea of gravity control and space-time manipulation, concepts that were dismissed as impossible decades ago. Could it be that Lazar was telling the truth all along? One of the strongest pieces of support for his claims came from pilots and military officials. In recent years, highly trained Navy pilots have reported seeing UFOs that behave exactly like what Lazar described. Objects with no wings, no visible means of propulsion, yet moving at impossible speeds. The Pentagon has even declassified footage of these encounters, proving that something is out there, and it's not obeying the laws of physics as we know them. If these UFOs are using the same kind of gravity-defying technology Lazar spoke about, then the implications are staggering. Either someone on Earth has developed technology so advanced that it defies our current understanding of science, or, just maybe, Lazar was right about extraterrestrial involvement all along. Now, this is the real question. If such groundbreaking technology exists, why would the government hide it instead of using it to revolutionize transportation, energy, or even space travel? The answer might be simpler and darker than you think. Control. If a government, or any group for that matter, held the secret to unlimited energy and gravity-defying travel, they would possess the ultimate power. Wars wouldn't be fought over oil. Space exploration would be limitless. The entire balance of power on Earth would shift overnight. And that kind of change isn't something those in control would allow to happen easily. Another reason? Fear. Imagine the world waking up one day to undeniable proof that we're not alone in the universe. Religions, governments, economies, everything would be shaken to its core. People panic over far smaller things. What would happen if humanity collectively realized that not only do aliens exist, but they've been here for a long time? Lazar has repeatedly said that he believes the government has been slowly preparing the public for this reality, drip-feeding small bits of information over the years. And when you look at the recent disclosures from the Pentagon, the increasing number of high-level officials acknowledging UFOs, and the mainstream media taking these stories seriously, it does seem like something is shifting. But despite all of this, Lazar's story remains as controversial as ever. Some call him a liar, a fraud, or even a government plant designed to spread disinformation. Others believe he risked everything to tell the truth. Either way, decades after he first came forward, his claims haven't faded away. If anything, they're becoming harder to ignore. So is the world finally catching up to what Lazar said all those years ago? Or is there still more to the story than we've been told? Keep watching, there's more. The price of knowing too much. If Bob Lazar had kept his mouth shut, his life might have been very different. No government harassment, no threats, no endless debates over whether he was telling the truth or just making up stories. But once he spoke out, there was no turning back. It's easy to assume that if he were lying, he wouldn't have faced such intense scrutiny. Think about it. Why would the government bother trying to discredit someone who was just making things up? And yet, from the moment Lazar went public, his life became a series of strange and unsettling events. But here's where things get weird. Although there are no records confirming his academic and employment details, Lazar has detailed knowledge of physics and engineering. He's even worked with high-level scientific equipment, something that would be nearly impossible without formal education. Moreover, the former Los Alamos National Laboratory employee's confirmation of Lazar's employment, contradicting official denials, and the 1982 Los Alamos newspaper identifying him as a physicist are two key facts that make his claim hard to doubt. If Lazar was never officially part of these institutions, how did he end up working on one of the most secretive projects in history? Either he was lying about everything, or someone went to great lengths to erase his past. Imagine being watched every moment of your life, knowing that if you step too far out of line, something unfortunate might happen. That's the reality Bob Lazar says he faced after exposing the government's extraterrestrial research. Shortly after his claims became public, Lazar said he was followed, his phone was tapped, and strange cars loitered near his home. Friends and family reported being followed, their homes being broken into without signs of forced entry. Even some of the journalists who interviewed Lazar experienced strange incidents. Cars broken into, hard drives wiped, mysterious phone calls. If this was all just some elaborate hoax, why the extreme measures to silence him? One theory suggests that the government didn't necessarily want to stop Lazar from talking. Instead, they wanted to discredit him. By making his life chaotic and riddled with controversy, they ensured that his claims would always be met with skepticism. After all, the best way to hide the truth isn't to eliminate it. It's to bury it under a mountain of doubt. Decades ago, Lazar's story seemed outrageous. The idea that the government had alien spacecraft hidden away in a secret facility sounded like science fiction. But today, the world is starting to catch up. High-ranking officials, former intelligence officers, and even Pentagon reports have acknowledged that unidentified aerial phenomena, UAPs, are real, and they're not ours. The US government has released declassified videos showing UFOs defying the laws of physics, much like the crafts Lazar described. In 2020, the Pentagon even admitted to running a secret UFO program, something Lazar had hinted at years earlier. And former government insiders have come forward, backing up elements of his story. So, what does this mean? It suggests that Lazar might not have been lying after all. Maybe, just maybe, the world is slowly being prepared for a revelation that will change everything we thought we knew. Because here's the thing, if Lazar's story is true, then we're not just dealing with UFOs. We're dealing with technology so advanced that it could redefine human civilization. Free energy, space travel beyond our wildest dreams, the ability to manipulate gravity itself. But the biggest question remains. If the government really has this technology, why haven't they used it? Is it too dangerous? Too disruptive? Or is it simply too powerful to share? If anything, Lazar's story is becoming harder to ignore. And as more evidence comes to light, the world may have to finally confront a truth that has been kept hidden for far too long. Bob Lazar never wanted to be a whistleblower. He wasn't looking for fame. If anything, he wanted to disappear. But his story has taken on a life of its own, one that even he probably never anticipated. Whether you believe him or not, there's no denying that his claims have stood the test of time. Skeptics have tried to tear him apart, yet his core story has remained unchanged for over 3 decades. So what happens now? Will the government finally acknowledge what Lazar revealed all those years ago? Or will his story remain an unsolved mystery, buried under layers of secrecy and doubt? Most importantly, when that truth finally comes out, will we be ready for what it means? The final pieces of the puzzle. Bob Lazar's story doesn't fade into obscurity. It keeps growing, evolving, and pulling people deeper into the mystery. Even after decades, the controversy surrounding his claims is just as intense. Some believe he's a whistleblower exposing the biggest cover-up in human history. Others say he's a fraud who fabricated an incredible sci-fi tale. But if that's the case, why do so many puzzle pieces seem to fit together? If Bob Lazar was lying, the government's best response would have been silence. No threats, no raids, no interference. Just let him fade into irrelevance. But that's not what happened. When Lazar first came forward in 1989, the US government could have dismissed him outright. Instead, strange things began happening. His birth records, gone. His alleged employment history at Los Alamos, vanished from official databases. His house, raided multiple times by federal agents, long after he'd left the spotlight. Coincidence? Maybe. But the sheer number of coincidences raises eyebrows. The biggest red flag was the raid on his scientific supply business in 2017. Curiously, this raid happened right after Lazar discussed element 115 on Joe Rogan's podcast. He hinted that he might have had a sample of it. Days later, his lab was swarmed by federal agents. If Lazar is just a storyteller, why does the government seem so interested in what he has to say? The implications are staggering. Not only would it change how we see ourselves in the universe, but it would also explain why the government has kept such a tight lid on the subject. Imagine the global shockwave if people learned overnight that alien crafts had been in our hands for decades. Economies would shift, religious beliefs would be shaken, and power structures would be tested. Lazar's story, if true, isn't just about UFOs. It's about control. Control over knowledge, over technology, and over how humanity understands its place in the cosmos. Bob Lazar's story has been under scrutiny for decades, and while the core of his claims remains the same, some details have changed over the years. Skeptics have pointed out inconsistencies. Early on, Lazar described the craft's interior as smooth and futuristic, with no visible seams. Later, he mentioned that the control panels seemed to be molded into the ship as if they had grown that way. Some critics say these shifts suggest embellishment. Another point of contention is his education. He initially claimed degrees from MIT and Caltech, but no records exist. His response? He insists his records were erased as part of a cover-up. Lazar argues that minor discrepancies are normal when recalling events under immense pressure, especially when the government allegedly tried to discredit him. He also claims he's deliberately withheld certain details for his safety. Could these changes be a sign of deception, or do they reflect a man forced to alter his story for survival? His supporters believe the latter, pointing to the fact that much of what he revealed decades ago, such as the government's deep interest in UFOs, has since been confirmed. But skeptics remain firm. If his story is true, why have some details shifted? One thing is, Bob Lazar isn't the only one who has stepped forward with shocking claims about secret UFO programs. Over the years, others have come forward, some with eerily similar stories. One of the most notable cases is David Grush, a former U.S. intelligence officer who testified before Congress in 2023, stating that the U.S. has been recovering non-human spacecraft for decades. He even claimed that some of these craft contain biological entities, a chilling way to say aliens. Then there's Dr. Eric Davis, a physicist who allegedly briefed government officials about retrieved off-world vehicles that were being studied. He hinted that some of the technology was so advanced that human science simply couldn't reverse engineer it. Many of these whistleblowers never met Lazar, yet their accounts line up with what he said 30 years ago. Could they all be lying? Or is it possible that Lazar was just the first to break the silence? The fact that more credible figures are now stepping forward, years after Lazar was ridiculed, makes his claims harder to ignore. Even if Bob Lazar is telling the truth, there's a good chance we'll never get full disclosure. Not because the information isn't out there, but because most people won't believe it. Think about it. If the government suddenly announced that alien spacecraft had been recovered and studied for decades, how many people would actually accept it? Public skepticism has been one of the greatest tools for keeping this secret hidden. The idea of UFOs and government conspiracies has been ridiculed for so long that even when serious whistleblowers speak out, many people automatically dismiss it as nonsense. The media plays a role in this too. When major news outlets report on UFOs, they often frame the stories in a way that makes them seem absurd or far-fetched. Even when the US government confirmed in 2020 that military pilots had encountered unidentified aerial phenomena, a fancy term for UFOs, it barely made a dent in the public consciousness. And then there's the psychological factor. Humans resist ideas that challenge their existing worldview. Accepting the existence of advanced alien technology means accepting that everything we know about physics, history, and global power structures is incomplete. That's not an easy thing for people to do. In a way, the secrecy surrounding UFOs has survived not because the government is good at hiding things, but because the public isn't ready to fully accept them. Bob Lazar's story remains one of the most compelling and controversial accounts of UFO secrecy. Whether you believe him or not, the questions he raises don't go away. Why was he able to describe technology that mainstream science is only now beginning to explore? Why did the government seem so determined to erase his history? And why, decades later, do more whistleblowers seem to confirm parts of his story? The search for the truth isn't over. If anything, it's just getting started. What do you think? Was Bob Lazar telling the truth, or was it all an elaborate story? And if he was right, what else might still be hidden from us? Do you believe the government is keeping alien technology under wraps, or is there another explanation? Let's hear your thoughts in the comments. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also, click the following video shown on your screen. You will enjoy it.